Hello and welcome to this webinar where we'll learn how to run on the AWS cloud with AWS training and certifications. Just so you know, this will be recorded, so it will be available thereafter for yourself and any of your colleagues who might have missed out on the session. Before I proceed, my name is Yves Manegard. I work for AWS in the training and certification organization here in Sydney. And I'll just start with a few words on what we're going to do here today. We're basically going to talk a little bit about why people go with AWS training and certifications. And this is to say the main benefits that customers achieve when engaging with us. We'll also talk about the how, so how we build these plans together and what we put in them. In the end, we'll close with a few stories of some customers, including one of my own customers, which I think you'll really enjoy and also learn from. At the end, there will be time for questions, but certainly feel free to ask questions throughout the session if you wish. I'll do my best to answer them as possible. Alrighty. So when we talk about learning to run on the cloud, I'm kind of doing a pun here, and I'm encouraging you to think about the idea that to run in the cloud, to operate rapidly, to iterate rapidly in your developments, you're going to want to set solid foundations. And you know, like with many of our services here at AWS, we learn the best from our customers. So we learn from our customers about what works in terms of learning and enablement. And as a result, we've developed a set of best practices, which I'll be sharing with you today. I'm hopeful that you've heard about the Cloud Adoption Framework. The Cloud Adoption Framework is something that AWS has developed over the years, and the key idea is we're trying to help you prioritize 6 key perspectives, 6 key sets of considerations that you should think about in order to be successful in the cloud. And so security might be one, and operations, but the one we're talking about today specifically is the people perspective. And so it's really a question of, from a human resources angle, what are you doing to be successful in the cloud? And specifically in this people perspective, the one we're doubling down on today is the training management aspect of it. So it's really a question both for yourself, but also for your team or company or department. You want to think about, as you and other people join the company or the team, or even as you change projects and as you grow in responsibilities, what are you doing and what is the organization doing to make sure that you are successful and enabled for success in the cloud? So it's interesting because research actually confirms the effectiveness of training. And again, this is true at both an individual level and also at an organizational level. So on the left, I'll talk first about the personal level. We've recently conducted a survey and we found that 73% of respondents agree that they were more effective in doing their jobs if they pursued certification. And really, that actually makes a lot of sense, right? If you imagine yourself going through this journey with us for certification, you're probably going to go on multiple days of training. You're probably going to do a number of hours of self-study as well. You're going to prepare specifically for an exam, and then you'll actually sit an exam. And by doing all of that, it's quite obvious really that you're going to come out feeling much more confident and effective in doing your job. Also at an organizational level, there's a great benefit, a side benefit here for the employers who send their staff on training, because we see that employers who put training plans, comprehensive training plans in place, we see that they report higher retention. And again, this is quite obvious, right? If you picture yourself tomorrow coming into the office and your management says, great news, we're going to invest thousands of dollars and days worth of training in you and all of your peers, that's a really positive message, and who wouldn't want to be part of that culture, right? So there's an interesting nugget here, though. when we survey IT leaders, most agree that they're moving to the cloud, right? Whether it's some of their environments or all of their environments, moving all in, it's happening. And it's only happening within a matter of a few years at most. But what's interesting is when we survey the very same group, 68% of them recognize that there is a skills gap between where they are and where they need to be in order to achieve these objectives. And that's actually growing year on year by 127%, which is quite obvious, right? Because this trend towards cloud is only increasing, and therefore the gap is only increasing. So we've designed an approach to help our customers approach the challenge of training and enabling people for success. And it involves comprehensive training plans. There's really three key pillars in any training plan. And the first key pillar is digital training. So I'm hopeful some of you would know that we have a portal at aws.training. I highly recommend you check it out. It is currently entirely free and features resources for all sorts of levels of skills and knowledge about AWS. So we have a lot of introductory content, but we also have content that specifically caters to helping you pass the exams, which is obviously what we want to support you with as part of this journey. The second key pillar is classroom training. This is interesting because I often get the question about, hey, can I replace one with the other? Can I just do digital or can I just do classroom? And I really recommend that you do not skimp here on either. They're complementary. They do not replace each other. Digital training is great because people want to be able to learn here and there. You know, you might have 10 minutes spare in the morning or in the evening, and that's enough time to go and learn something. But for core learning, especially for highly technical profiles, nothing replaces the classroom environment where you're going to be in front of an AWS certified trainer, an accredited trainer who goes through a very rigorous process to become a trainer. And you also get to benefit from the experience of everyone else in the room. So you're not only interacting one-on-one with the trainer, you're also interacting with the peers in the room who have usually great questions and different challenges to yours. So they're going to ask different questions, but you're going to learn from it too, which is great. And then the final key pillar here after digital and classroom training is certification. And certification does two things really. At an individual level, it helps you communicate what you've achieved and what you're capable of in terms of your AWS skills. At an organizational level, it is a great way to track progress. So if the organization is embarking on a comprehensive training plan, which we refer to as a guild or an academy, this would be a great metric by which they can track how is the plan progressing, how many people have gotten certified, how many people in each type of certification do we have. And the way we organize these key pillars is in a number of phases, really, because you shouldn't be trying to do everything at once, or that'd be too much of a challenge, really. So what we recommend is you do it by phases. And the very first phase you want to look at is foundations. Now, what's great about foundations is it's not just for technical people, it is also for your stakeholders, your business executives, your people like project managers, product owners, even auditors. There's going to be something for them here in this phase. And I'll go through a few of the examples, but specifically Cloud Practitioner, for example, is a good general fit. And we've also got more technical options or even less technical options depending on the profile of the people that we're looking to train up. Now, moving on from the foundational phase, technical roles, technical individuals, for example, architects, developers, system operators, should be proceeding to the associate level class. And they can do this the very next day after they do the foundational training or within a matter of a month or so. That would be my recommendation. And again, we'll talk about each of these in detail. Finally, in this journey, and this can be anything from 6 months to 12, 24, 36 months as appropriate for your cloud adoption journey, you'll want to be proceeding with professional and specialty training. So for instance, architects can become professional level architects. Developers and system operators can go to a DevOps engineering course and certification. And then we have also a number of specialty options such as security, networking, machine learning, and big data. Now, below all of this, at all times, I've written digital training and experiential days. The reason I've put it there is throughout this journey, at all times, it is appropriate to do digital training and experiential days. I'll just touch on what the latter means. It's the notion that you shouldn't be doing just training in isolation. That's not going to be enough. And we're certainly not here to prescribe training in isolation. What you want to do is make sure that after training, you send your staff or yourself, you go to an activity such as a hackathon, and you make sure that you're putting AWS at the heart of that activity, because it's going to create a safe environment and a temporary environment where people can try out the ideas and the concepts that they've learned in the training. I touched on digital training as well. Again, there's going to be appropriate content at all times. We have the very basic 101 sessions that just talk about what is cloud, and then we have more advanced content that will cater to exam preparation for all levels. So I want to go through a specific example. Let's say that in 20 minutes or so, you're walking in the office and you bump into one of your colleagues, let's say Susie. You bump into Susie and Susie says, hey, I'd like to learn about AWS. Do you have any ideas? I don't know where to get started. You'd say, well, that's pretty easy. Just go to aws.training. There's content there. You can filter by role and you'll find something appropriate. So off she goes. Susie checks out aws.training and she finds a couple of things have been really nagging her. She's been really curious about what AWS does in the machine learning space because she keeps hearing about that. And so there's a video, and in 10 minutes she can get a primer on that. She can get a good introduction to what we do in that space and what customers can achieve with us. She might explore a few other things like S3. She might have heard about S3 a lot. At some point, she'll decide, actually, you know what, I really need a solid foundation here on what AWS is and what it brings to our organization. And so she notices Cloud Practitioner is available online for free, goes for about 6 hours. That's appropriate. And so she fits that in her schedule quite neatly. Sooner or later, though, as an architect, in order to achieve core learnings that will really help her do her job in the cloud, Susie will find great value in attending the Architecting on AWS class. And that takes her to phase 2. And at that point, she'll be in a good position to start preparing for the exam that will help her actually communicate her credentials in the organization and beyond. Later on, it might be 6 months later, or more realistically, perhaps 12 or 24 months later, she might decide to pursue onto the advanced architecture path. All right, so that was just an example. I want to go through a few other learning paths, and we'll go through a number of roles, and I'll try to not spend too much time on each of them. Let's start with generalists. I hinted at this earlier. We do foundational training for all sorts of profiles. This means that whether you're a project manager or an engineer or a risk or auditing person, there's going to be something in there for you. And there is great value for all of these individuals to have a solid understanding at a high level of what cloud brings to their organization. I'll give you a few examples. If I say high availability in a meeting with people from various disciplines, it's really valuable that people understand what that means in the cloud and how different that is in the cloud. Or if we talk about the shared security model or things like data sovereignty, it's really nice when people actually know what those things are and what they mean, and also how they're implemented in the AWS cloud. So for all those individuals who are not necessarily very technical and who don't necessarily interact directly with the AWS platform, Cloud Practitioner Essentials is a great option for them. And what's even better is there is even a certification for it, which will help them communicate, again, that they have this level of skill and knowledge. And if they want to go beyond that, they can. So they can quite simply log on to AWS.training again, the same portal where you do Cloud Practitioner. You can also go and do additional modules. I'll give you a few examples. Your colleagues in finance might be really interested in some modules we have, such as TCO, that's total cost of ownership for you, as well as cloud economics. Those are two modules that I'd recommend for that audience. So enough about the generalists. Let's go through some of our technical profiles we talked about earlier. So the first technical profile I'd like to touch on is the architecting learning path. Right, earlier we mentioned that there is architecting, developing, and system operations. Those are the three main paths at the phase 2 associate level. So for an architect, as I alluded to earlier with the example of Susie, really I'd recommend that you start with technical essentials. And there's two good reasons for that in comparison to Cloud Practitioner. The first one is that technical essentials is mainly delivered in person. So you get that value, which is you get to work with your peers, the other people in the room, they'll have different questions and you get value from that. And you also get to interact one-on-one with the trainer. But the second benefit is even better in my view. It's the fact that technical essentials actually features hands-on labs. So if you haven't already, you'll get to experience the platform. And even if you have, you'll get to do specific exercises that get you through some of the learning outcomes that we're trying to achieve there as a foundation before you proceed with that journey. So then the next step would be the 3-day class, Architecting on AWS, followed by Exam Readiness, which is a workshop, roughly half a day, dedicated to helping you pass the exam. So it helps you understand the exam as best as possible. And that's available both in person or on the portal for free at aws.training. You'd then be in a good position to take the exam in any of our CBD locations. And at that point, that's a great first step. For most technical professionals, hitting the associate levels is both sufficient and excellent really for what you're trying to achieve. Now later on, both in your career, so in terms of progressing your career, but also if you've got responsibilities that mean you need to be an expert, it may be appropriate to proceed to the professional path where it goes through a similar iteration of going to a class, an exam readiness session that is optional, and then an exam. So moving on now to the developer learning path. Similarly, you'd start with the technical essentials class, the one day that has both hands-on experience as well as theoretical content. Just a note on that, you'll notice that all these three associate level paths start with technical essentials. And the reason for that is really these three profiles, they have very much the same concerns when you think about it, right? The objectives they have, generally speaking, when they adopt AWS, these professionals, they want to make sure that the solutions they build are cost-effective, reliable, flexible, secure, and highly scalable. So the foundation is the same, but of course what differs is each of those roles has a different perspective. The architect is concerned with making designs that translate well in terms of achieving those goals. But the developer is more interested in how do I achieve those very same goals from a developer's perspective, which means how do I achieve it with the SDK and the APIs. So that's what this course focuses on. Again, I'm not going to go through that entire journey, but very soon you'd hopefully hit the certification at the associate level. And then again, in a horizon of a number of months, 6 to 24 as appropriate, this individual might choose to proceed to the professional level, which translates to the DevOps engineer class. And I'll touch on that in a moment as well. The third main path we have is the operations path. So this is really for system administrators and operators. Same thing, you start with technical essentials and proceed to the 3-day class SysOps. What's interesting here is at the professional level, notice that it merges with what the developers were doing. So developers and system operators at the professional level attend the same class and achieve the same certification. And when you think about it, this actually really makes sense, right? So DevOps, just a very, very short few words on DevOps. It's a portmanteau term, right, for development and operations. And it's the very basic notion that in the past, these two operations, these two teams worked very separately. And that caused some challenges. For instance, in troubleshooting scenarios, that is usually making the job much harder for both parties. So what DevOps tries to do is makes both parties work much closer together. And as an example, one of the artifacts of DevOps is CI/CD, right, which is continuous integration, continuous deployment. It's the idea that multiple programmers can release code into the baseline at the same time, and there's software that's managing that. And then it's also the idea that you're releasing some of these changes frequently, which means that everyone is better at change because change is smaller and more frequent. I myself have been in that situation in a previous life, and I can tell you that when change is not frequent, change is definitely hard. And so this class and this path will actually help you and your organization, whether you've started the DevOps journey or you haven't. You will find great value in attending some of these courses and pursuing the certification as well. Just an overview here of our certifications. I've gone over the first 6 already, so I won't talk about those again. What we haven't touched on is the specialty certifications. So if we look at these would be some of our latest certifications, in fact, and some of these also feature classes that fit. So for example, security also has a class to support that journey. Big data also has a class to support that journey. And in fact, we have a number of classes for data professionals that would make sense. Big data on AWS is one of them, but there's also data warehousing for people who specialize in that instead. Now, all this is well and good, but I want to touch on an important question, which is the value and the cost of training. In many cases, I do speak with customers and they're challenged on the budgeting front. But I always urge them to think about the cost of not training. So if we come back to the first idea I opened with today, I talked about the fact that most IT leaders believe they're moving some or all of their infrastructure to the cloud, but they also recognize they have a skills gap. That skills gap isn't going to disappear, right? It's got to be resolved one way or another. And one common way of resolving it is hiring external talent. But in ANZ, that hiring cost is usually quite high. When you think about all the costs of sourcing, agency fees, the cost of people ramping up, the cost of people learning your culture and learning your systems, versus the cost of taking existing staff and enhancing them in their experience with a bit of training at a cost that is often by an order of magnitude less than the cost of technical hiring, you suddenly see that actually training is really cost effective and stacks up. And so my team and myself, we're certainly more than happy to help you with that if that's something that you want to talk about. Now, another side benefit of training is that customers generally are more happy following training. We've touched on a number of benefits, right? We touched on the fact that you get improved collaboration when everyone is trained at a foundational level. And because of a lot of the foundational level content being free, it really makes sense that you'd spread that broadly in the organization. So that's internal. But then some of the other benefits is the cost is reduced, both the direct cost of the AWS environments, which will tend to be built better and therefore more cost optimal, but also, as we said earlier, training as opposed to hiring for people with skills will mean that you will have reduced costs. And in the end, projects will become better. We generally see a higher level of quality in projects that are delivered from our customers. So I want to go through a couple of examples which I think will be really relevant. And I'll start with this one. This is a story that we've developed with one of our customers who wanted to share it with us. They're a financial sector customer, quite a large customer, who were wanting to move all in on AWS. And as you can see here in this journey, they were struggling for a while to progress at the pace required. So the executive leadership decided to move to the cloud, but then in terms of executing that, there were definitely challenges and they were struggling to deploy these apps to production. The team engaged AWS to develop a comprehensive training plan. Think of it as a guild or an academy. And as a result, within a matter of a year, less than a year, they were able to massively increase that pace. So not one or two, but a many-fold increase in that pace of deployment of production applications. And this happened in a one-year horizon where everyone got trained as a result. So this was a great outcome for the customer as they were able to execute on their strategy. I also want to share with you another example, which is even closer to my heart because it's actually one of my own customers. M&F is an Australian ASX listed company. In fact, M&F Group works in the telecommunications sector. They develop global communications networks and software, which helps their customers deliver new generation communication solutions. Their strategy with AWS, as John Boson, my key contact there, has highlighted, is to leverage AWS as a platform to help them accelerate their ability to innovate as they strive to build customer-celebrated products and solutions. And I love this because it's so close to the heart of what we do here day in, day out at AWS. We are working very hard to make sure that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And with training, we're helping our customers, and in this case, M&F, we're helping them achieve that even faster with AWS. So just a little bit about their adoption path in terms of AWS, first of all, and we'll then talk about their journey with training. In the past, M&F focused on developing and building everything internally. So what that means is they would have built infrastructure and solutions on traditional equipment, whether virtualized or not. And that presented a number of benefits, but also some costs to them, right? And so currently what they're doing instead is they're moving to AWS. They're adopting a cloud-first mindset, and this is resulting in benefits in terms of savings, both time and money, that they're now putting to other places such as innovation. And the other key benefit for them is, as an Australian company that wants to operate globally, a great benefit for them is they're able to leverage our global platform and use the same set of skills to deploy globally uniform high-performance solutions across the world wherever we have a location, a presence. In the future, their intent is to continue to innovate on AWS with some of our cutting-edge services such as Lambda and EKS, our Kubernetes service. So in terms of the training journey, what happened is roughly in the middle of last year or so, John Boson, the CTO of M&F, engaged the account team and myself to help build a training plan. So we built a comprehensive training plan for the organization, basically built very much along the ideas that I've shared with you today. So a three-phase plan, and where we are currently is we've set the foundations. We're currently deploying this and making sure the entire team has a much better understanding of AWS and what it brings to the organization. So this is both for technical profiles and non-technical profiles. And one of the immediate benefits is that because everyone has a much better understanding of what they can do with us, they're actually accelerating some of those projects. There is less hesitation, right? And this comes back to that first notion I shared earlier on, which is that people are more effective in doing their jobs when they pursue training and certifications. Now, the journey hasn't ended here for M&F. They are continuing on to phase 2 and 3 this year, proceeding into specific courses that will help them drill into specific services that are of interest to them. So for instance, analytics would be of interest to them. They'd be able to tap into some of those classes and certifications. Now we're almost at the end of this session, and I want to close on one important idea. Again, it's in terms of the do's and don'ts that I've tried to share with you today. One of the things I often see is customers try to train only a few experts and they stop there and they think that's sufficient. But again, I highly recommend that you make sure that this is inclusive. You want to make sure that everyone can come along on this journey. And why wouldn't you when there is foundational training available on the online portal for free, Cloud Practitioner being the main option there. Of course, there is other options for technical profiles that we've gone through so far today. I hope you've enjoyed this session. I'm going to be sticking around for some questions, and certainly I encourage you to start your learning journey right now at aws.training. Again, there's a lot of content, both introductory or more advanced. Wherever you are in that journey, the portal will help you as you progress. Feel free to contact us via the URL and my private email as well. I've put it in there if you want to reach out.